Okay, I hope everybody's doing okay during this pandemic shutdown thing. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening with small businesses during this shutdown. If you're watching this video later on, we're in the middle of 2020 right now. It's mid-August, and small businesses are going out of business like crazy right now because of the coronavirus shutdown. And it seems to be very regional, though. There are some places where a lot more small businesses are getting shut down. Well, I say shut down, I'd say closing down actually permanently, just because people are afraid to go out, or the government has some mandates in place about capacity and everything, and they just can't quite make it. So it seems to be very regional, that there are areas where 40, 50, 60% of small independent businesses can't make it, and they're having to close and go out of business. But then there are other areas where it's maybe only 5, 10, 15%. Right here where I am located in Western North Carolina, it doesn't seem to be quite as bad. There are a couple nice little restaurants that have gone out of business, some gift shops and things on the town square. But overall, I think small business seems to be hanging on pretty good. So I don't know if we'll ever really get that information as to why it's very regional. It might have something to do with a strong chamber of commerce, better access to financing and business coaches and advice and support for small businesses, but we may never actually get that answer. MarketWatch.com did an article not too long ago where they featured some information from Yelp. And Yelp is an online reviews website mostly for restaurants and personal service places like handymen and contractors, but also spas and salons and that kind of stuff. And overall, Yelp said that they're losing up to 55% of their businesses, the small businesses that they have listed on there, have permanently closed. And there's some interesting statistics buried in the charts when you look at it. And one of them is that at the very beginning of the pandemic, in February and March, there was a huge slug of businesses that closed immediately. And then that permanent closures went down and temporary closures started to go up. And I think that the reason there was that big slug right at the beginning of, as soon as the pandemic hit, a whole bunch of businesses closed permanently, I think that was because those were businesses that were on the edge of closure anyway. A lot of them were probably businesses that had a big debt burden, too much overhead, a lot of restaurants that just weren't that profitable anyway. I've also talked to some entrepreneurs who were in their 70s and they had been looking for an excuse to retire, and this was just a very opportune time to just say, okay, I'm done, and close up shop. So I think, though, as time goes on and you look at this chart, it shows that as the temporary closures continue on down the timeline, more and more of them are going to turn into permanent closures. I think it's important, too, to look at those temporary closures, some of them as permanent closures that just haven't come public with it yet. I know that a lot of businesses, in order to get the PPP loan and the EIDL loans and things, they have to stay open and keep their staff on. And so they are telling the banks and telling people that they're going to stay open in order to have access to the money, but they actually, a lot of them, I think, have no intention of actually continuing to operate. So I think that the numbers are skewed there just a little bit too. It's important for a lot of small business owners, those small business owners and others that maybe are struggling, to understand that it's okay to let go. Failure is an option. I closed a business that wasn't making any money. I had an opportunity to sell all the assets and move on at the end of my lease. I mean, it was perfect timing. But even if it hadn't been perfect timing, it needed to be done. So failure is an option. You want to do it right, though. And actually, I wrote an article on smallish business about, actually titled "Failure is an Option," that describes who to tell and when to tell and all that kind of stuff. So I'll put a link to it down in the description. But one of the important things to remember about keeping failure as an open option for you and closing the business is that you don't want to waste all of that time and money and effort trying to keep something afloat that's maybe never going to make it anyway, that maybe wasn't all that viable, that your heart isn't in it anyway. Go ahead, don't waste any more time with it. Close it, put a period behind it, move on, because you're wasting time and you're wasting money what you could be spending instead building something that's great, that's going to meet all of your needs and demands and be a business that you'll really love. Another note on wasting time is let's not waste time during this pandemic shutdown. As if you have a small business that is closed right now, temporarily closed, and you're able to just put the brakes on for a little while and you're going to go back and resume it later, don't waste this downtime just sitting home watching Netflix. Take the time to do things to improve yourself, to improve your business, or if you don't have a business or a business you don't enjoy, start a new business. I actually started smallish business this spring in February and March, right when everything started shutting down. And I wrote most of my blog post articles in April and May, and now I've launched into YouTube. So I'm using the pandemic shutdown time to build a new business. And I encourage you to do the same thing.